Why is it illegal in this state to wake a sleeping bear just to take a photo, yet perfectly normal for an entire town to live inside just one single building? Welcome to 71 Dumbest Things. From Alaska, where we are exposing the wildest historical facts, like the time Japan actually invaded US. Soil, alongside absurd laws about flamingos in barbershops and the myths you still believe, like thinking penguins actually live here. We are proving which insane stories are 100% real history and which are just frozen lies. So hit that subscribe button before we reveal the truth. 1. Most Americans believe World War II stayed far away across the oceans, but they are totally wrong because Alaska was actually invaded. It sounds like a ridiculous movie script, but Japanese troops really landed on US soil and bombed Dutch Harbor. They captured the Aleutian islands of Attu and Kiska and stayed there for over a year, while the government kept it quiet to prevent nationwide panic. Brave soldiers fought in brutal freezing conditions where the weather was often deadlier than the enemy gunfire. This forgotten chapter proves that the war physically touched North America and left behind rusty bunkers that are still sitting there today, frozen in time. 2. It seems impossible to enforce, but state law says an intoxicated person cannot knowingly enter or remain in a bar where alcohol is sold. This creates a hilarious paradox where you go to a bar to get drunk, but once you are drunk, you are legally trespassing. Police can technically raid a pub and arrest everyone who is visibly tipsy for simply being there. It is one of those rules designed to give bouncers the power to kick out rowdy patrons before a fight starts. In reality, it means the moment you start having too much fun, you are technically breaking the law. 3. Most Americans look at a school map and genuinely believe Alaska is a tiny island floating right next to Hawaii, because that is where they put the box. The reality is totally different because if you cut Alaska in half, then Texas would still be the third largest state. It is actually bigger than Texas, California, and Montana combined, which just proves how much our geography classes failed us. You could drive for days and still be in the same state while people in Rhode Island cross their state in 20 minutes. It is a massive frozen giant that gets zero respect just because map makers ran out of paper. 4. The government actually thought it was a brilliant idea to detonate 5 thermonuclear bombs near a village just to build a harbor. And this was called Project Chariot. And in 1958, they seriously planned to nuke the coast to move some dirt. They told the local people absolutely nothing about the radiation and just wanted to see what would happen if they treated the Earth like a science experiment. Thankfully, some brave scientists and locals stopped it before the button was pushed. It remains one of the dumbest and most dangerous ideas in American history that proves the Cold War made everyone go completely insane. 5. There is a specific law that says you cannot wake up a sleeping bear just to take a photograph, which implies people were actually doing this. Imagine seeing a 1,000-pound killing machine taking a nap and deciding it needs to be awake for your Instagram story. And the state had to intervene because tourists were treating grizzly bears like Disney animatronics and getting themselves mauled. It is illegal for a reason, because a grumpy bear waking up from a nap is the last thing you will ever see. This rule is proof that common sense is not common, and people will do anything for a like. 6. Everyone thinks Alaskans live in round ice houses called igloos, but that is a complete cartoon myth that needs to die right now. Igloos were actually temporary travel shelters used by Canadian Inuit people, and were never permanent homes for anyone in Alaska. Living in a block of ice at 40 below zero without central heating is a terrible idea unless you are stranded. Real Alaskans live in wood cabins or regular houses with heaters because they enjoy being warm, just like you do. It is hilarious that people still ask locals if they have Wi-Fi in their igloo when they actually live in modern apartments. 7. Imagine if your entire town lived inside one single building, including the police station, the grocery store, and the post office. That is real life in Whittier, where almost everyone lives in baggage towers to escape the brutal weather outside. You can go to school, get your mail, and buy dinner without ever stepping foot in the snow or fresh air. It feels like a sci-fi movie where the outside world is toxic and everyone is trapped in a vertical bunker. If you get into a fight with your neighbor, you are stuck with them in the elevator every single day for the rest of your life. 8. The city of Juneau has a municipal code that specifically forbids bringing your pet flamingo into a barber shop for a haircut. You have to wonder what specific event led to this very specific rule being written down in the law books. Someone clearly walked in with a tall pink bird and caused absolute chaos while people were trying to get a trim. It is one of those oddly specific rules that makes you realize local government has too much time on its hands. Leave your tropical bird at home because the barber needs to focus on hair and not on dodging a pink beak. 9. You can actually see the future from Alaska because the Russian island of Big Diomede is only 2 miles away from Little Diomede. The international date line sits right between them, which means when you look across the water, you are looking at tomorrow. It is a literal time machine where you can wave at people who are already living in the next day while you are stuck in the past. During winter, the water freezes, and you could technically walk into the future, but that is highly illegal. It breaks your brain to think about how close America and Russia actually are in this frozen place. 10. People constantly say the sun does not rise for 6 months, but that is a total exaggeration that makes Alaskans roll their eyes. Even in the furthest northern town, the dark period only lasts for 67 days, which is tough, but not half the year. The rest of the state gets plenty of light and even has regular days just like the rest of the country. It is dramatic to say they live in eternal darkness, but the reality is just a really long gloom. Yet you still get twilight and it is not pitch black 24/7 like a horror movie set. 11. It sounds like a bad joke, but the United States actually bought the entire state of Alaska from Russia for just 2 cents per acre. Americans at the time were furious and called it Seward's folly because they thought buying a frozen wasteland was the dumbest financial move in history. They mocked the Secretary of State for purchasing a giant icebox that seemed totally useless for anything but shivering. History had the last laugh when we found billions of dollars in gold and oil underneath all that snow. It remains the greatest real estate heist of all time, where Russia basically gave away a fortune for pocket change. 12. Nod, you might expect strict laws about firearms, but Alaska is strangely terrified of the classic wooden slingshot. It is officially illegal to carry a concealed slingshot in your pocket without a proper permit, which treats a child's toy like a dangerous weapon. The law likely exists because bored kids or mischievous adults were causing too much property damage with rocks and elastic bands. Imagine getting pulled over by a state trooper and having to explain you are packing a slingshot for self-defense. It is a ridiculous rule that puts a piece of wood in the same legal category as a loaded handgun. 13. Every cartoon you watched as a kid lied to you because there are absolutely no penguins living in the wild in Alaska. People travel thousands of miles expecting to see happy penguins sliding on the ice, but they are only found in the southern hemisphere. If you see a black and white bird standing on a glacier, it is actually a puffin, which looks like a sad clown bird. It is embarrassing when tourists ask the guides where the penguins are hiding because they are literally on the wrong side of the planet. You have to go to Antarctica for penguins and not the North Pole. 14. Politics is usually a mess, but the town of Talkeetna solved it by electing a cat named Stubbs as their honorary mayor. This is not a joke because Stubbs served for 20 years and spent his days drinking catnip water from a fancy wine glass. He held meetings at the local general store where he would sleep on a pile of blankets while his constituents petted him. It was the most stable administration in American history because he never raised taxes or caused a scandal. He just purred and judged everyone silently, which honestly makes him better than most human politicians we have today. 15. The state had to write a specific regulation to stop school bus drivers from bringing a bow and arrow to work. Apparently, drivers were spotting moose or caribou on their rural routes and deciding to do a little hunting while the kids waited on the bus. It is a terrifying thought that your bus driver might pull over and start shooting arrows out the window at a moving animal. The rule exists to remind employees that their job is to transport children safely and not to fill their freezer with meat. It is the most Alaskan problem imaginable where the commute to school becomes a safari. 16. So everyone believes the myth that the government pays you a salary just to exist in Alaska, but that is totally false. The permanent fund dividend is actually a share of the investment profits from the massive oil industry and not a wage for living there. The amount changes every single year based on the stock market, so you can never rely on it to pay your bills. Outsiders think it is free money raining from the sky, but locals know it barely covers the high cost of heating their homes. You do not get paid to be cold, you get a small slice of the oil pie. 17. You would never expect to find a burning hot desert in the Arctic. But the Great Kobuk sand dunes are completely real. It creates a bizarre visual where you are standing on rolling sand dunes while surrounded by snow-capped mountains in the distance. Temperatures here can actually soar to 100 degrees in the summer, which feels like a glitch in the simulation. It is a massive area of shifting sand that looks like it belongs in the Sahara and not the Arctic Circle. This place proves that Alaska is confused about its own climate and just decides to be everything all at once. 18. You might think your state has some stupid laws, but Alaska takes the trophy with this specific regulation about airplanes and moose. It is officially a crime to push a live moose out of a moving aircraft, which begs the question of who actually tried this. The law was likely created to stop lazy hunters from herding animals from the sky, or maybe someone just wanted to see a moose fly. Imagine the chaos in the cockpit trying to shove a 1,000-pound angry animal out the door while flying. It is a perfect example of how every weird warning label exists because someone actually tried it once. 19. When people in the rest of the country talk about the lower 48 states, they usually think it refers to random states. In reality, Alaskans use this term to describe every state that touches each other while excluding themselves and Hawaii. They also refer to the entire rest of the United States simply as outside, which makes it sound like a prison. It shows how isolated they feel from the rest of the country and how they view their home as a separate world. If you are not in Alaska or Hawaii, you are just living in the boring part of the map. 20. We all know about the Bermuda Triangle, but Alaska has its own version called the Alaska Triangle, where thousands vanish. Since 1988, more than 16,000 people have disappeared without a trace in this massive area of wilderness. The rate of people going missing here is twice the national average, which is terrifying for anyone planning a hiking trip. Planes fly into this zone and are never seen again, as if the earth just swallowed them whole. Locals whisper about dark energy or magnetic anomalies that confuse pilots and hikers until they are lost forever in the frozen void. 21. You might think it is perfectly fine to protect your property, but Alaska explicitly bans stringing a tripwire across any road. This sounds like a cartoon trap where a coyote tries to catch a roadrunner, but it is a serious law here. The rule was likely written to stop angry neighbors from setting dangerous traps for each other during heated property disputes. It is terrifying to imagine driving down a dark highway and hitting a wire meant to wreck your car or worse. This specific legislation proves that some people actually tried to turn public roads into their own personal combat zones against their enemies. 22. Locals love to joke that the mosquito is the official state bird because they grow to the size of small helicopters in the summer. The swarms are so thick they can actually black out the sun and drain a person of blood in minutes. However, the actual state bird is the willow ptarmigan, which looks like a confused chicken that changes color in winter. See, it is hilarious that a tiny annoying insect has a bigger reputation than the official animal symbol of the state. If you visit in July, you will quickly understand why everyone fears the mosquito more than the bears. 23. During the frantic gold rush of 1898, a simple potato was worth its weight in actual gold nuggets. Miners were so terrified of dying from scurvy that they would trade their hard-earned fortune just for some vitamin C. It sounds absolutely ridiculous today to imagine paying hundreds of dollars for a single French fry, but starvation changes everything. Fresh vegetables were so rare in the frozen north that a sack of potatoes could make you the richest man in camp. It was a brutal time where staying alive was much more expensive than finding the mother lode. 24. Living the van life is popular, but it is illegal to ride inside a trailer while it is being towed on the highway. This law exists because the roads in Alaska are so bumpy and icy that a trailer bounces around like a rubber ball. If you were inside making a sandwich, you would be thrown against the walls and likely injured before you reached your destination. It seems like common sense, but apparently enough people tried to save time by sleeping in the back. You have to sit in the truck cab unless you want a concussion from a pothole. 25. Everyone assumes you cannot grow anything in a frozen wasteland, but Alaska actually holds world records for the largest vegetables ever grown. Because the sun shines for 20 hours a day in the summer, the plants never sleep and just keep getting bigger. Farmers regularly display cabbages that weigh 138 pounds, which look like something from a fantasy movie. It is a biological miracle that turns tiny seeds into monster crops that could feed a whole village. The soil might be cold, but the endless daylight puts photosynthesis on steroids and creates these absolute giants of the garden. 26. The devastating Good Friday earthquake of 1964 was so powerful that it actually turned the solid ground into liquid. This terrifying phenomenon called liquefaction caused heavy cars to sink straight into the pavement as if it were quicksand. The magnitude 9.2 quake ripped the earth apart and swallowed entire neighborhoods in a matter of seconds. It remains the second largest earthquake ever recorded in human history and changed the landscape of the state forever. Survivors watched in horror as the stable earth beneath their feet rippled like ocean waves and dissolved everything they built. 27. Road rage is normal everywhere, but in Fairbanks, it is a specific crime to honk your car horn at an eagle. The law states you cannot use a sound device to startle a raptor, which includes hawks and owls sitting near the road. It suggests that people were driving around blasting their horns just to watch the majestic birds fly away in panic. This is a weirdly specific rule that prioritizes the mental health of a bird over your need to honk at traffic. You just have to wait patiently if a bird is blocking your way to work. 28. Or so Hollywood movies have convinced the entire world that people in the Arctic greet each other by rubbing their noses together. This is a complete myth because the actual gesture is called a kunic and involves sniffing a person's cheek or hair. It is an intimate way to smell the scent of a loved one and not a weird friction game with your nose tip. The idea of rubbing noses likely came from explorers who misunderstood what they were seeing from a distance. Real Alaskans do not go around rubbing faces with strangers, so please do not try this on your visit. 29. World War II felt far away for most Americans, but Alaska was silently attacked by thousands of balloon bombs sent by Japan. These paper balloons drifted across the Pacific Ocean on the jet stream, carrying explosives intended to start massive forest fires. It was a bizarre and desperate weapon that mostly failed, but some did land and cause panic in the remote wilderness. The government kept it a secret to prevent fear, but it remains the only time the continent was bombarded by balloons. It sounds like science fiction, but it was a terrifying reality for those who found them. 30. If your car breaks down on an Alaskan highway, you have exactly 24 hours to move it before the state takes it. This strict law allows the government to immediately impound any vehicle left abandoned to clear the way for massive snowplows. In the lower states, you might get a warning sticker, but here, your car becomes a metal obstacle that could kill a plow driver. It is a harsh reality of living in a place where snow removal is a matter of life and death. So you better have a tow truck on speed dial or say goodbye. 31. It is genuinely embarrassing how many Americans panic and ask if they need a passport to visit Alaska. Travel agents constantly have to explain that Alaska is the 49th state and not a foreign country owned by Canada or Russia. Unless you are driving through the Canadian border to get there, you can leave your passport at home. It proves that many people skipped geography class and forgot we bought the place back in 1867. You are still in the United States, so you can use your dollars and speak English without any issues. It is the only place where domestic travel feels like an international expedition. 32. The official state flag was not designed by a famous artist or a government committee, but by a 13-year-old orphan. The Benny Benson entered a contest in 1927 while living in a harsh territorial school and beat out every adult. His simple design of the Big Dipper and the North Star perfectly captured the lonely beauty of the night sky. It is an inspiring underdog story where a forgotten child created the most enduring symbol of the state. Every time you see that flag flying, you're looking at the homework assignment of a kid who just wanted to win a watch. 33. You have to wonder what kind of monster made it necessary to pass a law forbidding dogs on the roof of a moving car. The state of Alaska explicitly bans tethering your pet to the top of a vehicle because apparently the trunk was full. This sounds like a scene from a bad comedy movie, but real people were actually endangering their animals this way. It is a cruel and stupid idea to turn your family dog into a hood ornament at 60 miles per hour. The law exists to protect pets from owners who clearly lack common sense and basic empathy. 34. Tourists arrive in Fairbanks in July packing heavy parkas because they believe the myth that Alaska is always a frozen icebox. They are immediately shocked when they step off the plane into 90-degree heat that feels hotter than Arizona. The interior of the state has a continental climate that creates blistering summers and terrifying wildfires that burn millions of acres. It is not a winter wonderland all year round, and you will regret bringing your thermal underwear. The sun beats down for 20 hours a day, cooking the land until it is dry and dusty. Alaska has a split personality that includes sweating. 35. The town of Chicken has the most ridiculous origin story of any place name in the entire United States. Early miners wanted to name their camp ptarmigan after the local bird, but nobody could agree on how to spell the silent P. They got so frustrated arguing over the dictionary that they gave up and settled on the much easier word chicken. It is a hilarious example of laziness becoming permanent history because a group of tough men were bad spellers. Now visitors flock to the town just to take a picture with the sign and laugh at the stupidity. 36. In the old logging days, fraud was so common that the state made it illegal to sell hollow logs to unsuspecting buyers. Unscrupulous timber sellers would stack logs so the hollow rotten centers were hidden from the person paying for the wood. It was the 19th century version of selling a used car with no engine inside. The law was created to stop lumberjacks from getting ripped off after a hard season of dangerous work. It reminds us that even in the rugged wilderness, there was always a scam artist trying to make a quick buck. 37. We have all heard the factoid that Eskimos have hundreds of words for snow, but linguists say that is a total exaggeration. The Yupik and Inuit languages are polysynthetic, which means they combine words into long descriptive sentences rather than using unique root words. They do not have a separate dictionary entry for every snowflake, they just describe what the snow is doing. It is like saying English has 1,000 words for cars because we can say red car or fast car. See, it is a fascinating misunderstanding of how language works that got repeated until everyone believed it. 38. The tallest tsunami ever recorded in human history did not happen in Japan or Indonesia, but in a quiet Alaskan bay. In 1958, an earthquake caused a massive landslide to fall into Lituya Bay, creating a wave 1,700 feet high. That is taller than the Empire State Building, and it stripped the trees off the mountains down to the bedrock. A few fishing boats were actually surfing on top of this monster wave, and miraculously survived to tell the tale. It was a geological event so violent that it reshaped the entire geography of the coastline in seconds. 39. Voting is a sacred right, but in Alaska, you lose that right if you have placed a bet on the election. The law states you cannot cast a ballot if you have an unsettled wager on the outcome of that specific race. It prevents people from voting just to win money, which honestly seems like a conflict of interest. This rule suggests that gambling on politics was such a big problem that the state had to intervene. It keeps the voting booth purely for democracy and not for settling debts with your bookie. 40. Visitors flock to Anchorage expecting to see polar bears walking down the street drinking soda like in the commercials. The reality is crushing because polar bears live on the sea ice nearly 1,000 miles to the north. You are statistically more likely to be attacked by a moose or a goose in the city than a polar bear. It is a classic case of tourists treating the entire state like one big zoo without looking at a map. And if you want to see the white bears, you need a very expensive plane ticket to the Arctic Ocean. 41. The Alaskan wood frog survives the brutal winter by literally turning into a solid block of ice. Its heart stops beating and its blood stops flowing until it looks like a frozen rock you could skip across a pond. Scientists discovered it produces a special sugar that acts like natural antifreeze to keep its cells from bursting apart during the freeze. When spring finally arrives, it simply thaws out and hops away, as if nothing strange happened at all. It is the only animal in the world that can technically die and come back to life every single year, which makes it a true biological miracle. 42. You might think fishing is a relaxing hobby, but catching a king crab without permission will absolutely ruin your life. It is strictly illegal to harvest these massive crustaceans without a specific permit because the fishery is worth millions of dollars to the state. The fines are so aggressive they can reach thousands of dollars per crab, which is more than the price of a used car. Wildlife troopers watch the waters like hawks and will seize your boat and gear if they catch you poaching. It turns a fun day on the water into a financial nightmare that you will never recover from. 43. Reality TV lied to you because ice road truckers are not driving over the churning ocean waves like you thought. The dramatic show made everyone believe these brave drivers are crossing the open sea on thin ice, which is totally false. In reality, they are driving on frozen lakes and the solid tundra ground, which is much safer and more stable for heavy rigs. Driving on actual sea ice is incredibly rare and dangerous because the tides cause the ice to crack and shift constantly underneath. The producers used camera angles and dramatic music to make a frozen lake look like a death trap. 44. Ordering a pizza usually takes 30 minutes, but in remote Alaska, it involves a literal airplane delivery to your door. Pizza Hut actually delivers pies to isolated villages by flying them in on small aircraft with no extra delivery charge for the flight. It sounds like a prank, but pilots load up stacks of pepperoni boxes and fly them hundreds of miles to hungry customers. The pizza itself is incredibly expensive because the ingredients have to be shipped up north in the first place before cooking. It is the ultimate comfort food for people living on the edge of the world who just want a slice. 45. You expect police officers to be upstanding citizens, but Alaska wrote it down in the law just to be sure. A person cannot be hired as a police officer if they have been convicted of a crime involving moral turpitude, which is a fancy legal term. This covers everything from dishonesty to vile behavior that society finds shocking and unworthy of a badge. It implies that some very questionable characters were trying to become law enforcement in the wild frontier days. The law exists to filter out the scoundrels who moved north to escape their bad reputations in the lower states and start over. 46. Most state capitals are easy to drive to, but Juneau is hiding from the rest of the country on purpose. Juneau is the only capital city in the United States that is completely inaccessible by road from the mainland of North America. You cannot drive there from anywhere else, and must arrive by plane or boat like you are visiting an island castaway. Locals have voted multiple times to move the capital to a road-connected city, but it never happens because they like the isolation. It creates a bizarre situation where politicians are physically trapped in the city unless the weather cooperates for a flight. 47. When you picture a national forest, you imagine millions of towering trees, but Adak is a pathetic joke of a forest. Adak National Forest is arguably the smallest forest in the entire country, consisting of exactly 33 pine trees huddled together. Now, soldiers planted them during World War II hoping to boost morale, but the harsh wind stopped them from growing tall. They are clumped together in a small circle trying to survive the brutal Aleutian weather without snapping in half. Tourists visit just to take a picture of the saddest forest in America and laugh at the official sign that marks the spot. 48. Hunters usually want every advantage they can get, but using an airplane to spot game is considered cheating here. It is a misdemeanor crime to view big game animals from the air and then land to hunt them on the same day. This rule, known as same-day airborne, prevents wealthy hunters from using planes to scout and kill easy targets from the sky. You have to wait until the next day to start hunting, which gives the animal a fair chance to escape into the woods. The law ensures that hunting remains a challenge and not just an expensive aerial execution for rich tourists. 49. People see sled dogs pulling heavy loads and instantly assume it is cruel animal abuse, but they are totally wrong. The truth is that huskies are high-energy working breeds that actually get depressed and destructive if they do not run. These dogs are born to pull and will scream with excitement the moment they see the harness come out for a trip. If you leave them in the backyard, they will destroy your house out of sheer boredom and unused energy. Mushers treat their dogs like elite athletes with special diets and massages to keep them in peak condition for the long races. 50. The gold rush was full of scams, but selling a photo of a ghost city takes the cake for creativity. A con artist sold thousands of photos of a mirage he claimed was the silent city appearing over a glacier. He told gullible miners it was a reflection of the city of Bristol in England, floating in the Alaskan sky by magic. In reality, it was just a regular photo of the English city superimposed on a picture of an iceberg to trick people. People were so desperate for magic in the frozen wasteland that they bought the lie without questioning the physics of it. 51. You might think trapping is a free-for-all in the wild, but using a snare for wolves is a legal minefield. It is highly regulated and often completely illegal, depending on exactly which game management unit you are standing in. The rules are so complex you practically need a law degree and a GPS to figure out where you can place a wire loop. This exists because lazy trappers were catching everything from family dogs to endangered species instead of wolves. If you get it wrong, the state will confiscate your gear and slap you with a massive fine that hurts more than a wolf bite. 52. Everyone blames the dark winter for mental health struggles, but the summer sun is actually the dangerous time for many people. Suicide rates are surprisingly higher in the summer because the midnight sun causes severe mania and sleep deprivation that drives people crazy. Your body never gets the signal to sleep, so you stay awake for days until your brain starts to malfunction from exhaustion. It is a cruel twist of nature where endless light becomes a torture device instead of a blessing. You find yourself mowing the lawn at 3 in the morning wondering why you feel so terrible. Naughty 53. Imagine waking up on Friday and then waking up the next morning and it is officially Friday all over again. That literally happened in 1867 when the calendar shifted by 11 days during the purchase from Russia. The international dateline moved to the west, which caused the entire state to repeat a day while the rest of the world moved forward. It must have felt like a glitch in the matrix for the confused settlers who just wanted to know the date. Alaska has always played by its own rules even when it comes to the passage of time. 54. You cannot just open the cage and let a domesticated fox run free because it creates an ecological disaster. This law was written after fur farmers gave up on their businesses and accidentally created invasive predator populations on islands. These foxes had no natural enemies and destroyed the local bird populations, which had never seen a four-legged hunter before. It is a classic example of humans trying to fix a mistake by making a much bigger one that nature cannot handle. The state had to step in and ban the release of any fox to stop the furry invasion. 55. People assume Alaska is a financial black hole where everything costs triple, but that is not entirely true for fuel. While a gallon of milk might bankrupt you, the gasoline is often cheaper than in California because it is refined right there. The state sits on a massive ocean of oil, so they get a discount at the pump while the rest of the West Coast pays a premium. See, it is a weird economic trade-off where you can afford to drive your truck all day, but you cannot afford to buy cereal to eat for breakfast in the morning. 56. The Exxon Valdez oil spill in 1989 was a catastrophe that dumped 11 million gallons of crude into the pristine water. The ocean looked like black soup, and thousands of animals died in the sticky sludge that covered the coastline for miles. Even today, if you dig a few inches under the rocks on certain beaches, you can still find pockets of that same oil waiting there. It is a dark stain on history that refuses to wash away no matter how many years pass by. It serves as a permanent reminder that nature never truly forgets our biggest mistakes. 57. Throwing a snowball sounds like innocent fun, but in some Alaskan towns it is technically a crime involving a missile. Municipal codes often classify snowballs as dangerous projectiles, making it illegal to throw them at people or private property. It sounds like the town council was run by a grumpy neighbor who got hit in the face one too many times by neighborhood kids. Police could theoretically write you a ticket for having a snowball fight in the wrong place at the wrong time. It takes the joy out of winter when your playful ammo is legally considered a weapon. 58. Locals will swear to you that the northern lights make a clapping or crackling sound like static electricity in the sky. Science says this is impossible because the lights are 60 miles up where the air is too thin to carry sound. Your brain is likely playing tricks on you by creating a sound to match the visual movement you see above your head. It is a fascinating example of how our senses can hallucinate when faced with something as overwhelming as the aurora borealis. The lights are silent ghosts dancing in space, but people still claim to hear the music. 59. It sounds like a nightmare, but the Rat Islands were totally uninhabited until a Japanese shipwreck in 1780. The sinking ship introduced rats to the pristine islands where they multiplied uncontrollably and decimated the local bird population. The birds had no defense against the rodents because they nested on the ground and were eaten alive in their own homes. It is a tragic story of how one mistake by humans can ruin an entire ecosystem for centuries without anyone noticing. The name of the island serves as a warning label for anyone brave enough to visit the infested rocks. 60. The internet loves the fake law about smiling in Nome, but the real oddity is the ban on bows and arrows. You cannot roam the streets carrying a bow because apparently people were treating downtown like a medieval archery range. The famous smiling law is a myth, but the city really did have to stop people from walking around armed like Robin Hood. It is a hilarious reminder that tourists will believe anything they read online while ignoring the actual danger. Keep your arrows in the quiver and focus on staying warm instead of worrying about your facial expression. 61. Everyone worries about finding Bigfoot in the woods, but in Alaska, the real nightmare is actually the Kushtaka. The native legends speak of a terrifying shape-shifting creature called the Otterman that lures sailors to their death. It screams exactly like a woman or a crying baby to trick you into coming closer to the freezing water. Once you are within reach, it tears you apart or turns you into another Kushtaka to serve it forever. It is terrifying that people buy bear spray for hiking, but have absolutely no defense against this supernatural monster. This legend is so strong that many locals refuse to go near certain coastal areas alone at night. 62. In the early 1900s, there was a serious proposal to build a massive railroad bridge connecting Alaska to Siberia. The plan was to link Paris to New York by train, which sounds like the plot of a steampunk novel. Engineers actually drew up blueprints for a bridge across the Bering Strait that would have changed the entire world economy forever. It failed because the Russian government changed and the sheer cost of building on shifting ice was astronomical. It remains one of the most ambitious infrastructure projects that almost happened, but was stopped by politics and the impossible reality of building on a frozen ocean. 63. Fishing laws are usually about size limits, but Alaska makes it illegal to handle a salmon suspiciously in shallow water. The law is designed to stop snagging where people rip fish out of the water without a proper hook in the mouth. It sounds funny, but wildlife troopers take the definition of suspicious very seriously when they are watching you from the bushes. If you are jerking your line or trying to foul hook a fish, you're going to get a massive ticket. It turns a relaxing afternoon on the river into a paranoid experience where you have to act natural to avoid getting arrested. 64. A huge number of dreamers move north thinking they can just stake a claim on land for free. They are crushed to learn that the Federal Homestead Act officially ended way back in 1986. You cannot just walk into the woods and build a cabin and expect the government to give you the deed. That romantic era of free land is long gone, and now you have to pay market price like everyone else. It is a harsh reality check for people who watch too many movies about the frontier and forgot to bring their wallet to the closing table. 65. In 1950, a United States bomber had engine trouble and jettisoned a live nuclear weapon right off the coast. This is known as a broken arrow incident, and the bomb has arguably never been recovered by the military to this day. It sits somewhere in the deep dark water rusting away, while divers wonder if it is still dangerous or active. The government assures everyone it is safe, but having a lost nuke in your backyard is not exactly comforting. It is a terrifying piece of Cold War history that is literally hiding just beneath the waves waiting to be found by a lucky diver. 66. Time usually follows strict rules, but in remote Alaska, employers can legally ignore standard time completely. If you are working in a camp far from civilization, your boss can decide what time it is for the entire crew. It allows them to maximize daylight hours for work without worrying about what the clock on the wall says. This creates a disorienting reality where noon might actually be 3 in the afternoon, just because the foreman said so. You are living on company time in the most literal sense possible until you get back to the city and rejoin the rest of the world. 67. Environmentalists were terrified that the Trans-Alaska Pipeline would melt the permafrost and sink into the mud. Engineers solved this by putting the pipeline on stilts with radiator fins that actually pull heat out of the ground. It works like a reverse refrigerator to keep the soil frozen solid so the heavy pipe does not collapse. It is a brilliant piece of engineering that allows hot oil to flow across a frozen landscape without destroying it. But the pipeline actually helps keep the ground stable instead of melting it, which is the exact opposite of what everyone feared would happen during construction. 68. Alaska is so massive and empty that it has the lowest population density in the entire United States by far. To put this in perspective, if the island of Manhattan had the same density, only 16 people would live there. You could walk from Times Square to Wall Street and never see another human being for the entire day or night. It is a level of isolation that the human brain has trouble comprehending until you are standing there alone. This statistic proves that while the state is huge, it is mostly just empty space waiting for someone to visit and fill the silence. 69. Technology has reached the wilderness, but you are not allowed to use a drone to interfere with a hunt. The law explicitly forbids using your flying camera to harass wildlife or ruin a hunt for someone else. It seems obvious, but people were using drones to scare moose toward their friends or just to annoy bears. The state had to step in and ban the practice to keep hunting fair and ethical for everyone involved. It is a modern problem in an ancient landscape where robots are now illegal if they are being annoying to animals or the people trying to catch them. 70. Drivers are constantly warned that gas stations are rare, but that is mostly a myth on the main highways. You can find fuel pretty easily if you stick to the major roads and plan your stops like a normal person. The real danger is not running out of gas but blowing a tire on the sharp gravel and rocks. Most tourists forget to bring a spare tire and end up stranded with a full tank of gas. It is a rookie mistake to worry about the fuel gauge when the road itself is trying to destroy your wheels and leave you walking. 71. Robert Stroud is famous as the Birdman of Alcatraz, but his criminal life actually started in Alaska. He was working in Juneau as a pimp when he brutally murdered a bartender during a vicious fight over payment. This was the crime that sent him to federal prison, where he eventually became the famous bird expert. Most people think he was a California criminal, but he was actually a product of the rough Alaskan frontier. So it changes the entire story when you realize his violent streak began in the frozen north before he ever saw a prison cell or touched a bird. So, which one of these frozen facts actually made your jaw drop the hardest? Was it the moose falling from the sky or the town living in one building? Let us know in the comments below, because if you thought Alaska was weird, just wait until we cover the rest of the 50 states. If you enjoyed questioning your entire reality with us, then smash that like button and make sure to subscribe to Dumbest Things for more insanity. We are just getting started uncovering the world's most ridiculous secrets, so ring that bell and we will see you in the next video.